been a hard week. It's been a hard week to be on the internet. It's been a hard week to watch our countrymen drown, and not be given aid, or be given aid, and the government hold. It's all been very hard. And then the continuing videos that we've been seeing of bombs dropping and children being blown up, and I'm just I the it it's feeling kind of hopeless and distressing, and I and then you think, is this the only way we have to live? This abandonment and despair and horror, is there no hope left? We hope. Well, what do we hope? Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Yeah, I don't know where to go right now. I mean, it's been a tough week watching on the internet, which is different from what's actually going on outside, which is a very pleasant autumn, actually. And at least
Yeah,
where I
here
am.
too. Yeah,
But I mean, you're closer to the floods and the storms.
I am closer. It's ironic. The East Coast people want to keep away from hurricanes, so they go up into the mountains.
And there it was
You
in
know,
the
and it was
mountains.
catastrophically worse. I mean, this hurricane hit Florida, and it's part of it's been devastated too.
Yeah.
But the waters recede pretty quickly there. Not so in the mountains. Um, yeah, I'm going to try not to say too much. Right before we went on, I said now I'm sad, but it's a step up from murderous rage, which I had been feeling just a minute ago. Um, I guess
Well,
that
we can
helps
do
you
murderous
not feel so
rage
sad.
if you want to talk about it. But I mean, so I abstractly, because I'm horrible and abstracting as a historian. I mean, it's clearly my defense mechanism, right? It's like something dreadful happens, so I'm going to make a history problem out of it.
Well,
I
it's
do.
hard not to notice things happening over and over again throughout history. So it's a understandable default for anyone.
Well, but it's a. Well, I was thinking we had the fires back in March that went across the Texas Panhandle and hit the region where my family is. Um, and it's like they're sparsely populated places. I mean, the
Hmm.
Panhandle, these are small towns. I was reading this morning, I know there's lots of stories going around about what happened to Chimney Rock in North Carolina, right? And I was looking it up
Hmm.
and saying, well, it was actually basically a street, right? It was
Yeah,
it would
it was a street.
it was a village, right, of
Yeah.
140,
Oh,
150 people. Um,
yeah. I mean, a lot of these places in Texas, I'm sure, are like that too.
right.
It was a gathering place for farmers.
Mm.
They didn't need a whole lot of infrastructure. You know, they
Right.
needed a place to get their mail and to shop and to meet their neighbors. And there's a lot of one street towns like that in the US, probably around the world too, but it's very typical in the US and especially in Appalachia. So,
Well, and that,
and
I
it's been
mean,
like that for a long time.
that makes sense. I mean, my historian mode kicks in, and I'm thinking about Albion Seed is always the great go-to in these
Yeah,
situations to
it's a great book.
understand the local situation, and that the settlements in Appalachia follow, of course, on the Scots-Irish border settlements, which
Hmm.
were I mean, the log cabin or whatever comes over from the borders of Scotland, and also all of these dispersed houses around because you don't but both the need to trust your neighbors because they're the only ones around for you, and deep distrust of the government because basically that was the English and Scottish kings going back and forth over your property, killing you
Hmm.
for centuries.
Also, the reason temporary type structures are popular within
Hmm.
that culture because you couldn't lose your house anyway, right? This,
Right.
and when I say that, I'm talking about the Borderlanders. So they had that in their history too.
Right.
It,
I
it,
noticed that with the houses that I've seen, floating away, right? That they are lightweight. I mean, as
well, yeah,
constructions.
there's a lot of trailers in this area of the
Yeah.
country because it's inexpensive and people could buy them and they were new and clean and had modern conveniences in them and they could be moved onto your land which you owned.
Right.
Right, that was very important to people. They were poor, but they owned their land.
Right. And so places like, I mean, Chimney Rock, they're calling it things like a tourist town, but it's actually more like the Crossroads mailbox. I mean, yes, we have
Yeah.
towns like that in the Panhandle where it's all
Hmm.
of the ranchers and farmers, or I guess mainly technically ranchers, but they're out in their homesteads and their farms and such, and they come into the town for those sorts of centralized
Yeah. It's
amenities.
it's it's the opposite of Europe, right?
Mm,
The European model was everybody had their farms and the town was in the center. People lived in the town and they went out during the day to work in their farms. So they kind of went in both places in Germany, towns in Germany were like that. And so here it's the opposite. People live out on their farms, and when needed, they'll come into this tiny little town for what they need, and then they'll go right back out to the outer edges again to their ranches and farms.
I want you all to mark that she has just completely accurately described the manorial system.
Yay me!
You've been doing some homework here. No, it's like villages. The Manor of Walton that I teach when I teach my Eurociv class is one of those. It's like these. There's a street and a village, and there's a church, and there's whatever other public buildings. But there's also the houses, and then they work their strips of land outside and come back to the village. Anyway, this is horrible abstracting. Like, oh yes, they're people who have watched their families die in the last week, and we're abstracting it to the field system in England. I mean, it's just like, it's
Well,
so
yeah.
the horror of what has just
Well,
happened for this region,
but yeah.
and of course, the from the satellite picture of how it's all lost electricity, so it's been wiped off the
It looks
internet
like North Korea.
the internet grid that we live in these streams, and so it's like that they're still. I mean, I saw Elon Musk posted on X a video of some people flew over. I couldn't tell whether it was a river or a road, right? Because it's flooded, but one that there were fairly substantial houses still standing, the
Hmm.
bigger places. So is it a resort area? You said that people are moving up there in there to get out of
Well,
the
was he
coast.
flying over Chimney Rock?
No, I'm not sure where it was, but there
Okay.
were
Well, there's
a fair
okay.
number of
Western North Carolina.
large
Yeah,
buildings.
Western North Carolina has a lot of uh, hiking and waterfalls. It's stunning. It's beautiful. I
Hmm.
was there briefly this past summer, and I said I can't wait to go back. I'm gonna have to wait to go back because
Right.
the entire Western North Carolina has just been completely devastated. I mean, even Asheville, which is a major city in Western North Carolina, the third biggest city in the state, it was completely underwater,
Yeah.
and it's shocking to see. But a lot of people will have homes in the hills, really expensive ones. They're vacation homes. Um, there are a lot of poor people that also live because they're very happy living out in the country where their grandparents lived, and they live
Right.
very modestly. They don't live in big homes, and these are the people that lost everything.
Right.
But yeah, there are some substantial houses there. People will go there. They'll retire there. They'll build nice big houses in the mountains, or they're and where they're close to towns like Asheville.
Hmm.
If or if they want to go out to a restaurant or something like that, it's actually a really nice area. Um, Nice as in beautiful, and it attracted a lot of money over the past 30, 40 years, I
Hmm.
think. For that reason. So the big houses you're seeing, yeah, they do have those. So you got you have a mixture of poor and rich throughout that entire area. But Asheville's the only place that's maybe concentrated. I think I saw a town close to it called Hendersonville on YouTube. It's
Hmm.
where I usually watch all these videos. Also devastated and underwater. And this was also a place that people were moving to retire to
Hmm.
because it's just so pretty and the weather's very mild there. So, people when they're getting older, they like that because a lot of Northeasterners, especially if they don't slip on the ice, it's important to be able to get around.
Right.
So that could be what you were seeing. I saw one video of a man standing in what looked like a mid-rise. This might have been Asheville,
Mm.
and he was filming the whole thing, and he's watching a building. I mean, the water was above the first floor, so he looked like he was maybe on the second floor because it was right up to the bottom of his window, and he was
Mhm.
well above the street. And a roof that looked like the size of a small warehouse was coming at his building,
Whoa.
and the phone lines were still standing, the telephone poles, and it split it. It went through it like this
I've
and just
seen
split
that
it in
one.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, don't hit our building, don't hit our building. And I'm thinking, this man has nowhere to go. The man filming this, if it does hit his building, he's dead. He's going to die. It's going to collapse and he's going to get stuck under debris and he'll drown because that's what happens in situations like this. It's really
Well, that
awful.
since the video was out there and it wasn't live streamed, he survived it.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
that's the sort of, yeah, the kind of, if someone was able to get the video out, there's still,
Well, not necessarily. I mean,
Well-
you can live stream this, right? And that has happened before in other situations.
yes, yes.
Yeah. But I don't myself really want to comment on the people in our government preventing people from helping. God, there's a special place in hell for them. I'll say that much.
Well, so this is some of the layers of meditation is, I mean, it's like, so we're talking about, it's a place where people have lived for generations. The people that came there were, I mean, the, refugees, as it were, from the clearances and the land grabs in the old world. There's there's money there now too, which are people that are, it's the sort of usual mixture that we get in our beautiful regions, right? That you have these beautiful mountains and the people either live there very poorly or move there and live there very richly. But,
Right.
I know this from the West too, right? That there's the very wealthy ski areas surrounded
Right.
by,
Or Hawaii.
yeah.
Hawaii is another good example.
Yeah. So we have this, then there's the other layer of being mad at the government. And how many layers of angry are we at the government by this point?
How many levels of hell are there? I haven't gotten through Dante's Inferno yet.
Well, fraud's the worst, right? So
I'm sure I'll
if
see them.
fraud's
I'm sure I'll
involved,
see
it's
their types there.
yeah. Well, okay, so no, one is, I mean, oh, well, of course we have hurricanes like this. It's climate change.
Yeah, we have, yes, you're right. We have hurricanes like this. We don't normally see the evidence of it from space. That's the new thing.
Okay,
Well,
so
we
there
weren't
is
in
there is
human
is
history
this,
normally reliant upon electricity as we have been. So
is
yeah,
it simply a natural disaster, and this is what human beings have had to cope with all along, which is
it's a natural disaster that's being made worse by bureaucracy, which has also been going on for a while.
Yeah.
right?
That, well, except, I mean, things like the clearances were land grabs. I mean, this is what's the irony
Yeah.
of some of this, right? Because the other layer is, somebody made it rain that hard. I think I've seen tweets to
Yeah.
that effect, right? That,
I have, and I don't.
they can control the
I
weather, and therefore they did it, right? So that
I
it's actually
totally
a
believe.
malicious land grab, just like the ones that, sent the people there in the
Yeah.
first place in the 17th century.
No, yeah, I totally believe they can make rain. Like they think it did that. I think it was Saudi Arabia where they had that catastrophic flooding because they'd been cloud seeding,
They've been
and then they
cloud
quickly
seeding, yeah.
left. Right. What they can't do is make it move up 1,500 miles. To go straight up the mountains like that. I don't believe anybody's got that kind of technology or talent. So I don't think that's what this was. I just think it was just a catastrophic storm. And I read that 40 trillion gallons of water fell in this area because it was actually 3 storms. The hurricane was so large and the outer bands so powerful that they made other rain clouds stall, and it just rained and rained and rained before the hurricane even got there.
Oh man. Yeah. So it just filled
Yeah.
up. Okay.
Yeah.
But so your level of rage, I mean, this is this testing Casey's level of rage. it's
Rage
like,
meter.
well, yes. I mean, and this is, the sort of response to the situation is an interesting test for us, right? In this, are we mad at God, right? For putting us on this planet and making natural disasters that come and destroy us.
No, we want to help each other. We're being prevented from doing so, and it isn't from God. That prevention's not
Okay, but I
coming
mean,
from
the
God.
rain is from God, right? If it's actually
Yeah.
a natural effect of the the atmosphere and the water system and winds and heating and cooling, and why hurricanes spin up in the way that they do. And I mean, like the fires in the Panhandle are another interesting test. It's like, yes, that region is susceptible to fire because it doesn't rain. But
Yeah.
you can make it worse by the way you use the land, or
Right.
the kinds of things you do on the land, like put power lines and stuff across it.
Or solar panels.
I mean, the power lines
heat
are
things
not
up.
making the rain happen, I don't think.
No.
But you could say, I mean, one of the other layers that I've thought about in the sort of history problem here is, okay, there are dams in that region, right?
I was reading there most of the dams there are some dams in North Carolina. They usually dam up rivers and lakes, but that's I think that's more east of Asheville, and Tennessee has a lot of dams. That some of the worst flooding was also in Tennessee because the water was filling over the dams. Because I think that it was, like I said, they just got a tremendous amount of water before the hurricane even got there.
Right.
But
But what I was thinking about with the dams is a lot of those dams are Tennessee Valley Authority. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that means that, they're large scale government projects from the 40s,
Yeah.
30s and 40s.
Somebody suggested that was for flood control, but I don't think it was. I think it was for electricity, wasn't it?
I think it was for electricity. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a double irony here, right? It's like there's these hydroelectric dams in a region that is now without electricity,
That is ironic.
built
Yes.
by the government in the previous, the why should we trust the government at all situation comes from, I mean, we weren't a country that had these sort of large scale government projects until the 30s.
Right.
Until
then, the government would tell people, "You're helping yourself. You're getting no money from us." They would take taxes, and people would ask for money back during disasters, and they would be told no. And Roosevelt changed all that.
Yeah, so we're in a kind of cycle now, talking about spin up cycles, right? Of expecting the government to help, particularly in that region. I mean, I think that's one of the sort of curious features of the region, if they're all, Trump voters now, that like on what side of things are you expecting the government to help you, right?
They're expected to get their money back from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is supposed to manage emergencies.
Yes.
I mean, it's
no.
in the name.
I'm just. It's like the other layer of things is you've said they're not. They recover a little bit more quickly in Florida, partly because they're more used to this problem, right? You build with windows that you can shut when the hurricanes come
Well,
through.
I mean, people did lose stuff. The insurance industry is collapsing there because a lot of the buildings were built very shoddily in the 1980s. Not the ones in the 1920s; they're still standing, right? So also these government works, these government projects. The reason
Right.
I think a lot of the reason people trust them wasn't just for nostalgia and warm feelings towards Roosevelt. It was because people actually knew how to build things then. The
Right.
quality was really good. The engineering was good. The materials were good. We sourced them all here. So people, if they think this is what's going on now, well, there's a couple of astronauts that may want to give interviews when they finally get back down to
Right.
Earth.
Right.
If they were to give honest opinions, which they can't give, but they're still working for NASA, but maybe one day they will. We'll see. But
Unlikely. Those people don't tend to. Those people don't
Yeah.
tend to. Yeah. So this is like, so it's the where to blame problem spins up quite, and so I mean, I think we've seen that the default, and this, I find this always intensely reassuring, of course, that the default for Americans in these regions is suddenly spring to help your neighbors, and they
Yes.
did that in Texas too, instantly.
Yeah.
Once they got the fire,
I don't-
people
you know, I
helping
don't-
with the
I think-
fires and bringing supplies in
Yeah.
and things like that.
I think
So
people do that everywhere, though, around our country. From what I've seen,
true, fair.
they get more opportunity to do it in the South because it tends to be more prone to things like hurricanes and massive flooding.
Yes.
So yeah, and fires.
Yeah, just
in
just
Texas.
the thought experiment. Europe doesn't tend to have these kinds of natural disasters. They have,
They do.
No, they don't. Like they don't
They
have.
have catastrophic flooding there.
Oh, they have.
They do.
Oh, well, no. This is my husband from who grew up in York. When I was saying it's flooding in North Carolina, he says, we used when we were in York, we always knew that that line was the high water. It's different, right? They do definitely have flooding in the Low Countries because that's undersea already, right?
Yeah.
And I think they certainly had terrible flooding in Germany a few years ago.
Germany and France also was
Right.
really awful.
But what I was
Yeah,
thinking
and
of
Ireland,
is they
it's all
don't have
over
tornadoes.
Not like we get them.
They
do
don't-
get them,
right.
which surprised me.
They don't
But
have
yeah.
have tornadoes. They don't have the kinds of weather systems we do because of the shape of our land, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, but someone needs to do proper studies of this, of like, the geographical history of our cultures or something like that, because in the Low Countries, yes, they got really used to dealing with the flooding because it did all the time, and you had to,
Yeah.
you could flood it to get rid of your invaders too, right? It's like, we'll open the dams and sweep away the whichever invading
I
army
did
is
not know
coming.
that.
Yes,
That's actually not a bad idea.
yeah, exactly, right. So the sort of the mixture of response to the natural environment versus feeling like you're got at by the natural environment, versus whose
Yeah.
fault is it that it just dumped? I mean, like a 1 in 100-year level of flooding. I mean, it's like,
Yeah, I think it was a 1,000-year flood.
okay, something like that.
Which doesn't mean only once every 1,000 years, as I read once, but I don't remember the explanation.
it's the average, right? So it could happen twice in 10 years and then not for another 1,000 and 500. It's like
Yeah.
it averages out. So yeah, it's not like, oh, now we've had ours, it won't come back for another 1,000.
Yay!
yeah,
Build that
that's-
vacation home. No.
That's not quite the way it works. But
Yeah.
but there is the situation of one of the things that happens. This is particularly in Florida, right? They're always building onto land that doesn't exist. It's a little bit like the Low Countries, right? We're going to landfill stuff and build onto it.
Yeah, there's a saying in Florida. It's like Florida belongs to the ocean, and one day the oceans will take it back.
Yes.
It's a scary
So
thought.
you're sort of renting it from the ocean
Yes.
without climate change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I am actually going somewhere with this meditation.
We're not just ranting, although that will be okay too, because we're really upset. We don't own our own helicopter, and
Well, yeah, but I mean, but
we
there's
wish
but
we did.
there's also it's interesting. So and then and then should we actually be more worried about the war that's happening, across the ocean?
I should be worried. Yeah, I should be worried about you doing what we want, Congress, and getting us out of it, and keeping us out of it, because it isn't our fight.
That too. Okay. What's the proper response to all of this?
I'm going to say something really stupid. Well, it's not stupid, it's smart, but it's something everybody always says. The proper response is prayer and fasting. Fasting's the other one.
What would St. Francis say? Since this is in fact his feast day, and you realize, it's meditating on the effect of being in creation, which is sort of sobering and
yeah, Sister Water is our friend.
Sister Water.
She doesn't hate us.
The sister. Well, this is right. And I think that, so we wanted to talk about St. Francis today, and then I was trying to make the ad for tonight's stream to put the poster up, and I was like, let's sing Brother, Sun, and Sister Moon. And I'm like, I don't feel like doing that.
I don't feel like it.
I don't feel like doing that at all. I can't imagine myself, frolicking through the fields with. Oh, I've forgotten what his name is. Graham Faulkner, I think. The young man.
Was that the actor?
Yes, the young man who played, Francis in the Zeffirelli movie, and Donovan songs, and it's all,
God, yes.
deep.
The
Oh, come on! It was lovely. What are you talking about? And there's Claire, all sweet and blonde and frail, and Francis, butt naked in the plaza because he's throwing off his clothes to spite his father. I don't think it was spite, right? That's not spite. His father's come and said, "What are you doing?" And you actually, what Francis was doing in that scene was donating his father's property to fix the church. Right. And his father, who was a great cloth merchant, said, "That's mine." And Francis said, "Okay." And his father said, "And those clothes you're wearing, those are from me too." And Francis said, "Good."
That did seem a little spiteful, although I don't know. Francis was a real spiritual judo master. He would take all these hits and take the energy from them and just redirect them right back at the person who threw it at him.
Indeed. So in our "what would Francis do" mode, right? This is, if we as Christians have a response to all of this. Help your neighbor. It seems default baseline, right? But the sort of feeling of this being got at and just over. I realize I'm sort of weary of, on all sides. It's not just with the flooding and the terrible descriptions of what people have suffered. But we're how many days out now from the election? Oh, I guess it's technically almost exactly a month, right? Out from the election, and the sort of.
Well, yeah.
You're angry with the government, and we're sort of saying, at what point is there even a government that is working in our interests, as opposed to just tax farming us and sending the money to things that we don't vote in favor of?
No, they've been tax farming us since at least 1940, maybe earlier, and it's been for foreign wars over and over and over again. People talk about the petrodollar. I don't think it's a petrodollar. I think it's a war dollar. Our economy depends upon it.
So we have Daydreamer. Hi, Daydreamer, and Evita is here. Saying we expect the government to help even though it's useless because we give an obscene amount of cash to the government allegedly for that reason. Well, yes. Yeah. And talk about, I spent last weekend reading about World War II. This was supposed to be a break from thinking about World War II, but we're back there. So, okay, how is this war dollars?
Yeah, well, see how it infuses even conversations in 2024, right?
Right. Well, yes, with Tennessee Valley Authority, and then what should we have done with the war? How did we get out of the Depression? Oh, we went to war. Yeah, it's the cycle.
Yeah. I'm not going to pretend to know too much about the economics of the 1930s. I read that the Depression was ending anyway. I mean, certainly people's cash didn't all completely dry up, right? There were people who had their wealth intact all throughout the 1930s. Kennedy family did, right?
Oh yeah.
Just as a most popular example, right? It was already going away. No, the war was about something else. It wasn't about economics. I do believe that there were people in our government that wanted us involved in it. I think it was empire building. That's what I think was going on. It was Eisenhower who coined the phrase, the military-industrial complex. And that phrase has been, at least through my life, has been ascribed to, hippies and peaceniks, right?
Right. But it was Eisenhower. Yeah.
Right. It was Eisenhower. They would say it derisively, as if to mock people. But I think that man was pretty smart. I think he knew exactly what was going on, and he wasn't predicting it. He was highlighting it. And there's been a lot of money made over and over again on this. Someone suggested that America was sending all of their old military hardware to Ukraine was to burn it up to start making new ones here, so that start the cycle over again to building new weapons. But you need new wars for new weapons.
Yep.
Yeah. Now I'm sad again and angry.
But I mean, this,
because I can't do anything about it. That's why. It's not because, oh my gosh, aren't humans horrible? Yeah, I already know that. That's not what makes me sad. What makes me sad is I can't do anything about it.
There is that, it's like, what should we do? Like how, and you said, I mean, the obvious answer is we need to look at what Francis says and consider it. But it's one, I recognize that Francis is in some ways everybody's favorite saint. Certainly he's one of my favorite saints. And since I've just spent the last, the dog needs to be.
He heard you talking about Francis.
He keeps getting trapped. And I have to like move stuff around under my desk to let him pass.
I wish I had a dog. You're lucky.
I am lucky to have a dog. The beast rules the schedule. What was I thinking about?
We're talking about Francis and how he's everybody's favorite,
everybody's
including
favorite,
your dog,
including my dog. Everybody's favorite saint, because everyone says, well, he most perfectly imitated Christ. Right. So if we are meant as Christians to be Christ-like, it should be Francis-like, which is, among other things, throwing off all of our possessions and living by begging, which has been a bit of a challenge for most people because they like having stuff.
they like having stuff, and other people who like having stuff look at people who are begging as lazy. Why would I give you my stuff? Go away, right?
This is a problem, right? It's like in the context now of like everybody who's now suffering, who's living in the region that just drowned, and people are need help, and we're saying, oh well, so our tax dollars have gone. We already paid our taxes. I mean, this is the sort of usual problem of where charity comes in when the government is apparently the one that's going to control all of the charity. That it the sort of basic level of it's fundamentally more virtuous for people to give voluntarily than coercively. And yet theoretically we're giving voluntarily because FEMA is going to come in and help our neighbors when they need help. And we know that their money is there because we've already given it to the government.
Well, we didn't though. We had it taken from us. Right. So it's coercion.
Well, the thing is, I think people who are going to be voting for Mrs. Harris in their imaginations pretend that that's what happens, right? We voluntarily give our money to the government and it gives us nice stuff, right? What would Francis say to that? What
Well, Francis would be trying to take his helicopter up the mountain and being told he's going to be arrested if he tries. Seriously, that
was
man needs to be hounded out of his job.
the
And in a
one the
polite
one who was
society, he
the
doesn't
one
belong
who
in
was
it.
trying to stop the guy trying to
Yeah.
help out with his helicopter. Which, okay, side note, right? The guy flying around with helicopter rescuing people did have all of the right training, right? He was actually,
Yep, he'd been doing it for 10 years.
yeah. So it wasn't like just some,
And his helicopter
vacationer
could
with his
get into small
helicopter.
spaces. The military helicopters could not.
So he was actually being, this is, yeah, the generosity. Well, I think the guy with the helicopter is actually more like the ones who would give to support the Franciscans, right? Who are,
Well, oh no, because he was out there doing it. I mean, with
yeah,
his, with
yeah,
his own
that's, he's
stuff.
actually doing the giving, right?
Yeah.
He is donating to help the people. Although that's indeed, it's like the reason that Francis was taking his father's money was to rebuild a building, right?
So
he had,
is it really stealing though? I wonder if even the current Italian government would consider that stealing since he was the son. I guess they might have thought he was entitled to it.
who knows, right? But that he was, he's in public works, right? He was meant to rebuild the church, which they do a nice job of in the movie with, they're carrying the rocks around by themselves and such and singing. He gets a team of guys and they build the church together. And
Were they clothed?
at that point, yes. He doesn't stay naked for very
So
long. The
silly.
bishop throws his cope over him so that he's clothed.
I always thought it was the Pope. I looked for my book. I read The Life of Saint Francis years ago, and I don't have the book anymore. So I thought that scene was in front of the Pope. It was just in front of the bishop.
It's the Bishop of Assisi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does with Innocent, when he goes to Innocent to say, here, we're trying to live according to what you would say, Holy Father, and Innocent says, you're filthy, go away. And so in the story, he goes and rolls around with the pigs and gets really muddy.
Yeah.
And he comes back and says, did what you said. Now will you prove our order?
Spiritual judo. Yeah.
So I mean, there
Shame
is obviously a lesson in here in how to deal with this kind of, it's like, utter obedience is a sort of superpower of itself, right? It's saying, okay, yes, I'll do exactly what you say, and then, okay, now you do what it only works. I mean, it only works if you're Francis. It only works if you are, in fact, living purely.
And it only works if the person under whose authority you are actually has your best interests at heart and the best interests of the people other people under his care.
Okay, that's a good question, because it's saying, to what extent are we? I mean, for Christians, this is always a question of what do we do with the government when it's tyrannical, which this one, ours is, because it is not allowing the people to make judgments for themselves about taking care of each other, which is tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
What do Christians do?
Don't they say in the South, "I'm gonna pray for you"?
In the what?
In the South,
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart. Which just means you're so dumb you can barely. Like, how do you live? Bless your heart.
That's what that means, right?
Oh yeah. Bless your heart. You're so stupid, but I can't say out loud because that would be rude.
Yes. Ladies, don't talk like that. But we think it.
But this, I mean, we're both tired and fraught, and I'm trying to hold on to the thread here.
The thin Franciscan thread, the brown thread.
The brown thread, the cord. That actually, there's a Franciscan magazine that's called that, the cord, right? So we can hold on to the sort of little cord of sanity and humility that we're trying to. What should we do? Faced with, I mean, we may have to deal with this in a month, right? If we're faced with the continuation of this administration. And and it's clear, despite of a good portion of the country and murderous willingness to perpetuate wars, as you correctly say, for the continuation of the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, it's for the war dollar. It's for the war bucks.
Well, this has gone even darker than I was planning. I was just going to be thinking about creatures and our relationship to the creation.
Speaking of dark, okay, I read the Canticles. I did my homework, and I opened up. I did go to page 25, but when I first did, I went to the document, page 25 of the PDF, and it was page 28, and it opened up to spiders. Why did you do that to me?
That's because it's on the spiders. Okay, so what I gave Casey to read was some animal stories of Francis. Shall we read the spider one, since that stuck with you?
Yeah, it was better than I thought, but I don't even like the word spider.
Oh, right. Well, here we have animal stories. I wanted you to go to the Canto of the Creatures, which is
page 25.
It was page 25, but not of the PDF, right? Of the book that the PDF came from.
Sorry.
But this is, so, we have, it's a challenge for us because we're kind of in this environmentalist movement moment problem of what do you do when when it rains on you so much you drown, and you blame. It's like, okay, so the layers of blame that I was thinking about. One, climate change, right? Which means we're just all, insofar as we try to do anything on the planet at all, we're evil. It's the way I hear climate change, right? It's like we are using forms of energy generation which don't exist in North Carolina right now because it's all been wiped out. To fuel our cities and our lights and our communication and our movement and our production of stuff and all of that. If we would just, it's a kind of radical, like, poverty imagining, right? If we would just stop doing all of that and go back to the land, something, I'm not sure exactly how, we wouldn't get drowned, I guess.
The people that were living on the land are the ones drowning, right?
Right, but the climate, it's like, let's just hold on to the climate change claim to start with, right? It's like we deserve to die because it's our fault. I think people are. We deserve to die because our existence on the planet is disturbing to its natural cycles. Never mind that its natural cycles always included the hurricanes and the tornadoes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I really think there were hurricanes and tornadoes before the Industrial Revolution. I'm really pretty sure about that.
Yes, there were.
Yeah. But climate change, these people living on the mountains in North Carolina deserve to die because they are part of a system that, because of its energy generation and consumption of material productions, creates worse weather events. I think we've stopped with the rising seas, right? Because as someone keeps pointing out, there's old pictures of the Statue of Liberty with the water level exactly the same.
Right.
It's okay. So maybe it's just the weather systems now are worse because
the
of
people
climate
screaming
change.
about climate change the most, these really wealthy celebrities, keep buying beach property, keep buying properties in Venice. Venice
is actually sinking.
It's literally sinking, like, quickly.
because it's built on, it's like the Low Countries, right? It's built on land that wasn't there.
Well, it's built on land that wasn't there. It was perfectly stable before the era of cruise ships pulling up to it, and the wakes constantly wearing much faster than nature would have.
They've worn away the land barriers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so they've stopped that to try to reverse it. But yeah, the people screaming the loudest, on their face, they're not just massive hypocrites. What they're doing is so obvious that they're clearly lying, right? You don't say the world's going to end in 10 years and then buy a beachfront property in Hawaii.
Right. No, what I tend to hear is there are too many people in the pretty places that we like to be.
It's exactly what it
How
is.
dare there be
Yeah.
those poor people in their mobile homes when we could be
Yeah.
building a chateau on the, yeah, I despise them. I really, really do. It's like, and you know, it's like,
No.
how dare these people? The landscape was so much better before all of these mobile homes came in. So,
Yeah.
so you want to be able to build your house in this landscape, but you
Yeah, but
don't want
their house
anybody,
is pretty and
you
and
don't
the
want to
people are
have anybody
pretty.
else, and the people are pretty, right? You don't want anybody else to enjoy that landscape.
Well, how can you enjoy it if everybody's got it? Start
Well,
building sneeches,
I do.
right?
Yeah, but I do think it's like, you know, landscape, it's sans people is the sort of fantasy here, right? That we have, you know, all those hard, I mean, and people do it on the other direction too. It's like all those horrible people in cities. You know what I think about cities, right? Greatest
Hmm.
construction that we, you know, the greatest artifact of humanity is our cities, plus everything else, right? The whole connection of it and stuff like that. It's like people imagine. I mean, I think we could build our cities more beautifully now, and it
Hmm.
would be truly appropriate and beautiful if they all looked like Assisi, which I don't think I'm showing Assisi here now. I'm going to
Oh, is that
skip.
the one on the mountaintop?
I'm skipping over. I'm just going to say the Cross of San Damiano. We'll come back to that, but
Okay.
here we go. Oh, here's more landscape. I here's Francis talking to the birds again. I'll get to Assisi here, right here. You know, it's like town with landscape, right? We all want to live in Tuscany. And how dare there be, you know, more people who want to live in Tuscany because it's so beautiful, and you know, if they put all their mobile homes down there in the valley, they deserve to die because,
That I'm laughing because that was literally an episode of Seinfeld
oh yeah,
30 something years ago.
what?
That one of his friends had a villa or a condo in Tuscany. And he
Mm.
says, "Oh, I'd love to see that. I'd like to. Can I get it?" He goes, "No, nope, they're all full up. There's nothing left."
Oh yes. Can't get what they're,
What? And
but
all of Tuscany. He said, "Yep, all gone." So
this is odd. This is very much what I often hear when people are complaining about this kind of thing. It's like there are too many people, and those people don't deserve the beauty that I'm enjoying.
yeah, yeah. It's this illusion of rarity, right? Because if everybody has it and it's not rare, then I don't feel special. And me and my friends don't feel special. It's increasing the value of something. And this like I mean, you've already pointed this out. This has a long history. I mean, the land clearances weren't really about aesthetics, but it did develop into that at some point. I visited. Oh, I wish I could remember the name. My husband's not around to ask him. I visited what's a landmark in Northern Ireland now. It was a manor that about 100 and something years ago. That's exactly what happened. There was a lot of poor people living on the outskirts of what was this beautiful estate. And the man who owned it didn't like having to pass all of these poor people on the way through his gate. So
Yep.
he evicted them all.
Yep. No, a lot of
Get out.
that we've talked about that in for one of our characters in Draco Chemicus, right? She's the aristocrat, and all of those stately homes in England tended to, you know, to the degree to they were landscaped, so that they have, you know, the great lawns and the sheep
Hmm.
meadows and the, you know, clumps of trees and stuff. I mean, some of those, they're completely artificial landscapes, and
Yeah.
they were designed so they didn't have to see the peasants living on their property.
Well, in this man's case, they weren't even on his property. I don't think they were outside the gate. He didn't like
Right.
having to pass through them, but he owned the property outside the gate too. So it was like,
Yeah.
yeah, just get rid of them. I don't want them here
Yeah, but it's
because ew, you know.
the thing is, you're making them sound so, just saying that it's rarity and such like that. One, there, so it's like interesting the degree to which certain regions are considered beautiful and people want to go live there. There's a lot of uninhabited land in the world, like lots,
Yes,
right?
a lot.
Most of it's uninhabited. Most people are clumped together in big cities.
Hmm.
And more, you know, one, and I feel like we've mentioned this, but I haven't developed it properly before. That the city and the countryside create each other, right? There's no such thing as just rural, right? It's like the city with its countryside, and this is very clear in Italy. The degrees of the towns like Assisi and the landscape around it. The landscape is landscaped by, thousands of years of cultivation, right? These are like,
it's amazing to look at.
Olive vineyards and stuff like that. It's not like pristine and pure and nobody ever touched it. The whole point is it's a big garden. So there's no such thing as the rural versus the city. The city, it like you were describing, the people on their farms come to the little towns for the post office or whatever, and they go back out to their farms. They exist together, right? So it's like if you had no little villages, you'd have no farms, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's why they're there.
Right. They go together, right? So,
they come to the cities to pull resources. And that's much more concentrated in places like Tuscany in that picture you showed. But it's the same concept.
Because they I was actually happy to see that there were mules available to carry supplies in North Carolina.
That was awesome, wasn't it? That was awesome. Mules are awesome.
It was great. It's like they're having to resort to animals. And I'm like, this is great. They've got animals. Right?
I know.
That's what we should be. Human beings belong working with the animals. Francis' theme, right? Let's go back to here he is preaching to the birds, right? People belong with the animals. That is, if there's no other lesson that we get from St. Francis Day today, it must be we've got to think yet better about how we actually exist together with our animals. And that includes our sheep and our cows and, the species that we've domesticated. So we've got bazillions of them. But, it also includes the squirrels and the sea lions and the tigers and, the rare ones, the cool rare ones that people like to, the dog pandas. They painted the suits.
That was funny. Oh, God, I can't imagine the trouble those people that ran that zoo got in.
I so wanted pandas and they had dogs instead. Oh, no. Anyway.
The panda was panting in the heat.
And barking. I think the pandas were barking, right? It's like, okay, barking pandas. No. Anyway. It's the reason the reason the cities in Europe look so nice is because they were built by people who, walked and had animals, and cars are a big problem, right? It's like my dad always used to talk about how, he tried to take Americans away from the cars away from Americans. You'd have, a revolt because Americans love their cars. And our cities are constructed and sometimes have been destructed in order to make roads, right, for our cars. So legitimate concern, right? The relationship between our machines and our living spaces. But it was funny when someone was saying, oh, they have to resort to the animals. I'm like, this is great. There's a mule train. This is brilliant. Right? Didn't
they look like efficient and happy and just kind of relaxed? And they were just trotting along because that's what they were bred to do.
Right. So
they're doing what they were bred to do. That they're not unhappy. They're not, abused. I'm saying this because I just know there's going to be people out there saying that's abusive to force them to work like this. No, working animals are happy animals as long as you don't abuse them and overwork them. They're happy.
Right.
Some of the happiest animals I ever see are in the airport, right? The dogs that they bring around to search for
all
contraband.
My dog gets to do is, entertain me. Right. Yeah. The sniffer dogs. Wow. They've got a job. Yeah. They
are happy dogs.
Yeah. They get to hang out with their person all the time. It's brilliant. So Francis' lesson, we need to be more integrated with the animals, and that's good.
Well, I love what you pointed out was that the reason he was preaching to the animals is because the people wouldn't listen to him.
Okay, so we're wanting to get to the creatures here, and we have you said we wanted the spider story. Where's the spider story? Oh. It was on 20.
That actually was a good story. That was on.
Oh, there's Sister Tarantula and Brother Spider. Which one do you want?
God. Whoa.
Okay, we'll do Brother Spider. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay,
I like that.
So these are
not as bad.
What I wanted.
So terrifying. Sorry.
some of the problems. See, now we've cheered up. We're actually thinking about Francis and the Animals, which clearly why everyone loves Francis, right? It's Francis and the Animals. We want to be
Yeah.
in it's like if a lesson that should come out of this. I mean, one the lesson with the landscape we need to consider a bit.
Mhm.
This whole long meditation realize came out of whether or not we're responsible for climate change, right? The thing is, I think the climate change question is the meta question that people have anxiety. Here's my philosophical thought for the moment. The climate change, it's the meta question people their anxiety that they have about having lost our relationship with the land.
Hmm.
I think
Anxiety, is there anxiety based on not understanding it and being afraid of it?
sorrow at losing it, I think. Right?
Hmm.
I think I don't know, right? Okay, so like today in our our writing discussion, guys, we just reminding you we do write every day or every weekday, and the poem is
Yep.
coming along, and sometimes things that we've discussed in our writing thing bubble up in conversation, and one of them talking about where addiction comes from, right? And the
Hmm.
sort of we had choices, trauma or boredom. um Both, right? But
Both, I would say. Yeah.
the with the environmental anxiety, which has been fed by, I mean, it's like this hatred of people, which is why we're angry at the government, because they seem to not care about actual people, and therefore not, I mean, they care more about the bureaucratic structures that they've created. And there's some completely horrendous, when you were talking about the war economy, right? I
Hmm.
so I've been watching Tucker Carlson's live shows, and I realize he gets up, he whatever he has on his mind, he just spins on for like 30 minutes in these improv speeches that he gives, and then he brings on his
That is
guests.
pretty
It's
impressive.
pretty impressive because if you're listening to them, there is actually a theme that goes through it, and I'm like, could I do that? I'm not sure I could do it in front of 10,000 people.
I bet you could.
I don't know. I don't know how, it's quite impressive. I don't know how he does it. But he spins up into that. Anyway, on the one I was listening to last night as I was driving around on the big freeways in our city, he had James O'Keefe talking about a documentary that they've just done. O'Keefe and his team followed the migrant trail from Venezuela up, including the
Mm.
clip that they showed was jumping on the train, which I guess they
Mm.
mean like they're hobo catching trains, right? They're jumping on these moving
Yeah.
trains. And what O'Keefe said, one of the main things he found out was, it's like, why is nobody doing anything to stop all of this movement? It's because there's money at every single, like, so if the
Yes.
government in the moving around bureaucratically trying to get aid to people or not in our national disasters, that a lot of it is, there's approved suppliers for stuff, and those approved
Yes.
suppliers that the government has accepted as approved suppliers, that that everybody wants to make
That's
sure that
right.
they have their finger in the pie of the provisioning and such like that. Well, it sounds like
Yeah.
the migrant stuff is similar in that, at every stage of this operation, there's kickbacks and payoffs.
Yeah. This is not charity. This is
It's
commerce.
commerce. Right. Right. Yes.
And the government says we have approved vendors we use to for aid in North Carolina. They are not engaging in charity with your money. They are engaging in commerce.
I think we're finding the root of the fury. Right?
Hmm.
Because, I mean, one of the things that people are complaining about is that the money's been spent on the migrants instead of on the
Oh, and they're going
the
to spend
citizens.
more. They just
Right.
came out and right out and said it.
Right.
Well,
Because
you're getting disaster relief funds. I bet $750 can buy a plane ticket back.
right, but so the corruption and the kickbacks and everything is entirely embedded in this system.
Hmm. It is.
I forgot where I was going. I couldn't do it. Tucker can
We
do it.
keep getting
Tucker can do
distracted
it. I
back.
can't. I can't. I'm
We should go back to talking about Francis.
Well, but so the thing is, we're
Makes me
disentangling.
laugh.
No, it's this. What's okay? One, that my fury and feeling is people get, how's this for a metaphor, right? We get trapped in these systems and stories that we can't find our way out of constantly, right? We're drowning, if you horribly use the metaphor. We're
Like a bad dream you can't wake up
yeah,
from.
we're
You keep
drowning in
trying to finish it.
all of these structures and systems that we can't see clearly. And I mean, the thing that I think people respond to Francis in is he's living late 12th, early 11th, early 13th century. He dies in 1226. He dies when he's about 40 something. Because
Oh, we're coming up on the 800th anniversary then, huh?
Ooh, very good point.
And he was canonized almost immediately. That was like a humongous outcry when he died to canonize him immediately. It was within 2 years, I think.
Yes. Well, and I mean, he had politically done things very smart by appealing to the Pope. And
Mm.
I mean, it was good that in his lifetime, the one he appealed to was Innocent III, who was actually quite like with it in terms of thinking about the kinds of structural problems that Christianity was facing in his day.
Interesting.
That I think so. The reason that Francis appeals so much to people is he does seem to have cut through a lot of the structural problems that people had in his lifetime, and that they have, well, on the one hand, ancient institutions that are sort of like embedded in the structures of everything. One, it's like how he knows what he knows as a Christian is because he studies with the Benedictines in Assisi growing up.
Oh,
So you have these
okay.
old monastic, foundations, institutions that are centuries and centuries old that are stuck in with the landholding and bureaucratic and lordship relationships. I'm not sure in Italy whether they have military obligations too, but they definitely do in other places. Like in England, the monasteries even have military obligations, right? So they're there, embedded in the structures of everything. But for example, with the church that he finds this crucifix in, the San Damiano crucifix, things are falling apart, right? The buildings are not being maintained, or there's and people are poor and
Sounds familiar.
and that there are people, and the cities are growing, right? It's in a period of big, for building with rocks and animals, big urbanization, right? In 12th and 13th centuries in Europe, the cities grow really fast. So it is analogous to some of what we're dealing with now, of like lots of people moving in from the countryside, big cities growing up. Not clear how you are meant to be Christian under these circumstances when your model for piety for centuries had been give money to the monastery, and it runs the agricultural system.
So they were depending upon it financially and socially and spiritually.
Right.
But now one leg of that stool is crumbling.
Well, things are changing, right? And this is, this obviously is why I like studying the Middle Ages too. Why the image of, the Middle Ages, everyone's always like, if they don't study enough history, it's like, when did the Middle Ages begin? It's like as if it's a single entity, right? It's like this during the Middle Ages, right? It's like 1,000 years of transformation. Much more massive than in many ways anything we've experienced since. Hidden in ways because we don't always have descriptions of it going on. In other ways, because the cities have been built over since. So, like the cities are where they were, but they've been rebuilt on. Assisi, not so much, because they built the big church for Francis, and so it's still there.
Grew up around it.
Yeah. It's huge, right? It's mainly the church for the Franciscans.
Now that wasn't the church that collapsed during the earthquake, was it? Which one was it?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. That was some of it fell down in 90. When was it? It was longer ago than I thought. And they've
was it in the 90s?
Yeah.
98 maybe? Huh.
They've reconstructed it. It was some of the upper church, some of the vaulting in the upper church fell down. Yeah, my Tucker Carlson this is failing me. Okay, so thinking about Francis is responding to big transformations. I was doing it, is it worse or better in the Middle Ages than now? It's like it's similarly disruptive, right? And
Mhm.
the sort of that he lives his life. Friars the Franciscans end up mainly going to the towns, mainly therefore in the new media environment of the city square, and preaching to the people mainly living in the cities under these new economic and commercial circumstances, right? So the Franciscans are
So this was the merchant class growing up in the New Market
precisely,
Square.
and that's
Got
why
it.
it's the story of him giving up the clothing he had from his father. His father was a merchant, right? He's wealthy merchant, so he's upper class
Hmm.
merchant. But that Francis is like the embodiment of the problem of what do you do in this commercial, mercantile, connected society. And the next layer of what happens to the Franciscans is they very rapidly, men join the order all over from all over Europe, right? They're a big international, then a big interkingdom, right? Organization, and
Yeah.
spread incredibly rapidly. There's Franciscans in Oxford by 1224, even before Francis dies, right? So it's like they
What?
shoot out all over Europe. And so insofar as the church has this international quality in that period, they are like it's great representatives because they are
Mm,
networked everywhere.
interesting. Yeah, they did it with no money and property.
Well, the curious thing is if you live like this, people start giving you money a lot, and then they end up in a big fight by the end of the century about what to do with the property.
Because they're not supposed to keep any, right?
Personally, they don't, and they come up with this
Right.
this look at this. I'm showing the church in Assisi right now. It's enormous.
Yeah.
That they come up with this the sort of they don't own the property, the order does. So personally, they're still begging, but
Right.
institutionally, they're situated. I still have this. We can read about the spiders, but I'm trying to make sure that I've unpacked all the nets. Have we achieved what our young Australian TikToker videoer maker says about the spider web of history,
The,
or have I
the
just
history
confused
bay.
everybody because there's no linearity to this
They need
episode
to. They
at
need to re.
all?
They need to remake a movie about Francis, and History Bay needs to be Francis.
Okay, I am now I'm now doomed. I'm doomed. That's excellent. He would make a very good Francis. He would be
He really
the
would
sort of
be a good actor.
troubadour
Yeah.
singer performance. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, well cast. We should suggest it to him. Somebody find his email. Um okay. So,
Somebody get a hold of Gibson. They're
oh
both Australian. It'll work.
my gosh, you're right.
What have I done? I'm sorry. I just completely derailed this again.
Now I'm just happy at the thought of a great movie about Francis, directed by Mel Gibson.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it?
That would be totally awesome. And okay, so no,
Look at
you
you.
guys, this stream has no structure whatsoever
Sorry.
because I've been spending the past several weeks trying to write a very structured piece on the Franciscan understanding of Mary, which maybe if you're nice to me one day I'll tell you about. Um, or like and subscribe, sign up for unauthorized TV so we have enough money to pay our artist whose work we will be
Oh,
showcasing very, very soon.
please. I'm gonna beg like a Franciscan
There
now.
we
These
go.
stars is
Right.
great.
Beg
You
like a
really,
princess for
really
art.
want to
You
pay her.
need Franciscan art. You need the joy of Franciscan art to get through
It's
these
amazing stuff.
times. Yes. Um, okay, so I think going back to the climate change problem and the infrastructure problem, it's like it's all of these things I think are people's understanding that we are um out of harmony with our world. And that I think they're not wrong about, right? I think the premise of the climate change stuff is bonkers, but I I think the feeling of not knowing our proper relationship to creation is actually accurate.
Yeah, and sometimes that takes a hostile turn. I have seen articles where people said, "Well, screw the people in the country. They shouldn't be living there. They should be living in cities. That's a proper place for a human being to live."
It goes both ways, right? There's
Yeah,
also people saying, "Oh, people are only true if they're living in the countryside." It's like,
right,
guys,
which is also wrong.
we
Yeah,
make both of
yeah.
them.
So there's a lot of misunderstanding or just complete lack of understanding of what it means to be human and to be in this world.
Yes.
It doesn't have a single locational definition. I mean, we create things, we grow things, we live with animals, we keep them as pets and grow them as food. I mean,
Right.
there's many different facets to being a human being and to being a human society.
Yes. And that we make things, right? So the craftsmanship, the Franciscans are the one of the things I have discovered in my studies with Mary is the Franciscans, they're merchant. They're not just merchants. They're the middle class of the cities. They're artisans.
Yeah.
Right? So they do find a place in their spirituality, both for merchants, right? They like using the image of, it's the image from Proverbs where the strong woman who manages her household, she's like
Oh,
a
right.
ship who brings her bread from afar. I know
Ah,
some very interesting meditations on that, of saying Jesus is the merchant in the ship that's
ah,
bringing her bread. So Mary, right? Excuse me.
oh, that's neat.
Right. So that, they're trying to imagine our, it's like how about this, right? This is a great thing I hadn't anticipated getting to. You think the Franciscan image, the meditation will give us this proper relationship to the land and the creatures, right? But it
Hmm.
also gives us the proper relationship to the city and the
Hmm.
merchants
Does.
and the
Yeah,
artisans
brilliant.
and the craftsmanship and that the
Hmm.
Marian imagery. Haha, this is great. The Marian imagery is all very, she's all the creatures, right? The sun and the moon and the stars, as from Apocalypse 12, or the rivers and trees and such from Ecclesiasticus. But she's also all the temple furniture, right? The temple, the ark, the
Yeah.
candelabra, the golden vase, and those are crafts. Those are things with crafts, right? So
Hmm.
a true Franciscan appreciation for our relationship to creation includes our artwork, includes our making things, includes all of
Yeah.
all, the desire to have the house on the mountain is
Oh,
part of it. Isn't that lovely?
that's very lovely. So you don't have to hate the people who buy their vacation homes there.
Right, exactly. This is we don't have to hate
Don't have to hate
we
anybody.
don't have to hate anybody. We don't have to hate the poor. We don't have to hate the rich. We have to see them in the proper
Yeah.
relationship with um creation. And
Hmm.
including the desire of people to have light, right? Another of the great images that I'm getting in the Marian descriptions is, I mean, the Francis, one of the things I'd want to tell you all about tonight was Francis's Office of the Passion, which is his like literal imitation of Christ, which we may get to or may not. We can talk about Francis again. That it Francis is completely literal about everything, which is what's interesting about him, right?
Yeah.
If the scriptures say give all you have to the poor, he does. you know but and they also say things like there's the light, right? So they're incredibly literal about things like God, Servus Sanctus Sophienza, one of my guys, is talking about Mary is called light, right? She's filled with the light of the Lord, so she's the temple, so she's filled with light. They're both incredibly mystical and completely like incarnate and I mean creaturely is the best way, because you say material, it sounds Cartesian or something, right? They're
Hmm.
they're completely enjoy at the beauty of all the creatures, because Francis was. I mean, we know
Hmm.
that
Yes.
from the way the same book, which I told you to go to page 25, was actually talking about
Sorry.
Francis. Um, yeah, so say things like this is memorials from his brothers, particularly Thomas of Celano, who wrote his first life. In order that all things might arouse the love of God in his heart, Francis would praise the divine craftsman for each thing which he had made, and whatever he found in things he would refer to their maker. He rejoiced in all the works of the Lord's hands, and his insight penetrated beyond these pleasing appearances to their life-giving principle and cause. In beautiful things he recognized him who is beauty itself. Everywhere he followed his beloved by means of the traces of himself which God has imprinted on all things. He made all things a ladder by which he climbed up to the throne of God. And that will make it sound like it's just about the birds, right? But the Franciscans, because they're sons, I mean, and they're sons, right? Because they're men. They're sons of craftsmen very, very frequently, right? That they're townsmen. Serva Sanctus, one of my guys who I talk about a lot, came from Faenza. Faenza is the source of faience, the glass, right? The beautiful glass. So the Franciscans, when they make this giant church in Cimabue and Giotto and other great artists paint beautiful pictures on it, they love beauty and craftsmanship. And
That's neat. I love that phrase, divine craftsman. He's like, it's the anti-Masonic message. God is not a great architect. He's a divine craftsman.
yes,
He creates, makes beauty. And I also love when you said how literal Francis was, because I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but apparently God spoke to him when he was going to become this, founder of this order, and said, go fix my church. He was like, what? And he looks around, there's a completely dilapidated church. Says, well, okay, and he grabs some tools and goes in and starts hammering and
that's
fixing up this church.
So that's the Church of San Damiano, right? That's the,
Yeah.
yes. He's like
Very
Francis
literal.
takes everything beautifully literally, which means if he says God made things, he's like, cool, God made things.
Yeah, that's neat.
and so God made all these creatures. We make things in the image and likeness in which we're made. So we're craftspeople. It's everything like joyous and beautiful about Christianity is so intensified in Francis's meditations. And it's, I mean, obviously, I think that's entirely appropriate for Christianity. Francis was right. He was right in not abstracting and making it,
Right. It's not just the church is in bad shape. You need to go fix it. Administratively, it's like, no, literally, I need to go fix this church. It's falling down. People need to use it.
Yes.
God needs to be worshipped here. So he was not anti-materialist, you should say, or anti-material, not materialist. He was not anti, created things.
Right.
And yeah.
And people would
That's
think
pretty
that is
cool.
how he lives by begging, and he's like an ascetic.
Yeah, he's a hippie.
Well, an ascetic, therefore he doesn't believe in the goodness of stuff. And it's like, no, he actually did, and it was as much because he really believed in it that he trusted it. I mean, there's a sort of Jesus saying, Solomon in all his beauty was not arrayed like the flowers. God will care for you. So okay,
Right.
we'll believe that, right? We'll actually believe that.
And they literally believed that too.
And he literally believed that too. But I like what you said about he. I mean, this is obviously the problem for now in North Carolina. Is like people have to build houses. People have to go build something.
Yeah.
That there's this concrete reality of you need to fix things. You need to fix things. You actually need to fix things, not abstractly, on paper with a plan of some kind of bureaucratic system. No, go build the house. Which is exactly what, as you said, like the people that are trying to help with their helicopters and donkeys.
Right. Go get your helicopter, go get your donkeys, and just go deliver stuff now.
Right.
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 And they did. They got up immediately and went. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful thing to see.
But that's responding as you say, that's very much responding as Francis does is we are made to make things, and that includes building things. I do think it also in the long run includes embracing the technology we've talked about a lot, right? Saying that the technology has McLuhan effects that we need to be aware of, and I'd say Francis is a great example of understanding those effects because he understands the effect of being incarnate in the midst of all of this craftsmanship. So the usual twinning of saying that I as much as we joke about demons and the AI and things like that, I don't tend to think that the tech itself is the problem. I do think our relationship to the tech is challenging, which is, another of Francis's, being able to give it up and not attach to it so you don't make it an idol.
Mhm.
Very, very important. But on the other
Yeah.
hand, the making of it is not itself the horror.
Yeah. Yeah. Although it still creeps me out.
Well, here we're gonna have the
Even though I
spider
just
story. You
used
want
it today.
why it's like so Brother Spider. One evening, after preaching all day in the churches and squares of Brindisi, St. Francis went to spend the night on a little peninsula near the port where there were many gardens and trees. Gardens are people made too, right? Everything gardens, it's not nature,
Yep.
it's sculpted nature.
Yes.
He found there an isolated little wayside shrine, poor and abandoned, in which there was a picture of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin into heaven. Side note on okay, so Francis is very devoted to Mary, and one of the things that I'm enjoying writing about with his devotion to her is she is for him the frame of everything that he understands about Christ. I mean, it's like he literally makes her. He has a salutation to her of her as the Virgin made church, which he means she's the church in whom Christ becomes incarnate. So he calls her palace and tabernacle and house. Mary's the house, right? So if you're rebuilding the houses, you're rebuilding Mary. Although he was tired, he prayed before this lovely picture while the last rays of the setting sun were shining on it. Then he fell asleep. They're also big into light, right? That's just the sunlight. During the night, an industrious little spider silently wove its web all over the image, hiding Mary's beautiful face. St. Francis arose before dawn and began to pray. When the first rays of the rising sun fell on the shrine, he noticed the thick spider web. And though the dewdrops on it reflected the sunlight like many pearls, he grieved at not seeing Mary's lovely features. You were given this one to be freaked out and land on. This is great.
I know.
So with bold zeal mingled with fatherly kindness, he said to the innocent little spider, see, the spider has obstructed Mary's face, but the spider's still innocent because the spider is busy building, right? And the
spider's doing what spiders do.
And the spider web is covered with pearl-like dewdrops, gemstones. This is a gem-studded spider web. Good, very good. Brother Spider, how dare you cover up the Blessed Virgin's face? If she never used a veil, how dare you put one on her? Remember that she was all pure and all beautiful, yet you want to darken the splendor that shines from her immaculate features. Okay, there's so many footnotes hitting me right now. No, that because of course the Franciscans become famous as the defenders of the Immaculate Conception. But in this sense, it's like, see how it comes out of simply the desire to praise her in her beauty, right? She's all pure and immaculate and but covered with pearl like spider drops. No, that must never happen. Brother Spider, you did wrong. So now take up your delicate web, undo its net, and remove your work from Mary's face. Brother Spider hastened to obey him. It took its web away and went to spin it elsewhere.
I wish the spiders would listen to me, but they don't.
Well,
stay out of my house.
I would have more trouble with the Brother Snake story if there were one of those, right? That I'm not afraid of
one.
Regular spiders. I've seen bigger spiders that I might find difficult, but yeah. It's so there's lots of these animal stories. Some of them, like with the birds, right? He's the joke about the birds is he was saying he was preaching to the people, and the people weren't listening to him. And he says, "Fine, I'll go preach to the birds, and the creatures will listen to him, but the people won't." So there's this, it's like, at what point are you going to, you're the ones with souls and reason and such, and you won't listen to me, but these animals will. It's a bit of a tease.
Yeah, they're not using their intellect, the intellect God gave them, or their soul properly.
Right.
Because they can't even compare to the animals who will listen.
And of course, what your soul is meant to be responding to is being in the creation, right? So at that point we have the famous Canticle of the Creatures, which is what we get when you have not Donovan singing Brother, Sun, and Sister Moon, which makes it a hippie song. It's actually a little more complicated than that. And he said, okay, so it's the so-called Canticle of the Creatures, which is what they used as the basis for Brother, Sun, Sister Moon. And it doesn't end quite the way people, I think, usually expect. Because you think from the way the hippie song has it, it's dance around in the flowers, right?
Dancing in the moonlight. Yeah.
Yeah. So Francis, he wrote this apparently about a year before he died, and was in considerable pain, partly because he has the stigmata by this point. It's like, to here we'll go to the stigmata pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's one. Okay, so he's receiving the stigmata, and they apparently gave him pain for the years that he had them, and he's also fasting and living quite ascetically, so that's why he dies in his 40s. He said to his companions, "I wish to compose a new hymn about the Lord's creatures, of which we make daily use, without which we cannot live, the creatures of which we make daily use, without which we cannot live, and with which the human race greatly offends its creator." A short while later, after hearing of a quarrel that had broken out between the civil and religious authorities of Assisi, nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
Francis asked the brothers to go before him singing these verses, but added 2 more verses. And then he composed his final ones on his deathbed. And it says there's a refrain which may be used after each verse, but just the refrain is, praise and bless my Lord, and give him thanks and serve him with great humility. But here's the actual Canticle of the Creatures. Most high, all powerful, good Lord, yours are the praises, the glory, and the honor, and all blessing. To you alone, Most High, do they belong, and no human is worthy to mention your name. Praised be you, my Lord, with all your creatures, especially Sir Brother's Sun, who is the day and through whom you give us light. And he is beautiful and radiant with great splendor, and bears a likeness of you, Most High One. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Moon and the stars. In heaven you formed them clear and precious and beautiful. Praised be you, my Lord, through Brother Wind, and through the air, cloudy and serene in every kind of weather, through whom you give sustenance to your creatures. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Water, who is very useful and humble and precious and chaste. Praised be you, my Lord, through Brother Fire, through whom you light the night, and he is beautiful and playful and robust and strong. Praised be you, my Lord, through our Sister Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us, who produces various fruit with colored flowers and herbs. So far, familiar environmental tree hanging, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Remember, he's in pain. Praise be you, my Lord, through those who give pardon for your love, and bear infirmity and tribulation. Blessed are those who endure in peace, for by you, Most High, shall they be crowned. Praise be you, my Lord, through our sister bodily death, from whom no one living can escape. Woe to those who die in mortal sin. Blessed are those whom death will find in your most holy will, for the second death shall do them no harm. Praise and bless my Lord, and give him thanks, and serve him with great humility. It's always a shock to find out death is one of them.
I was going to say, the hippies probably don't like hearing about the death part. We'll just cut that part out.
Yeah, well.
It's a downer.
And the thing is, the praising of the creatures is, you realize I think everyone hears Canticle of the Creatures and think it's going to be about dogs and cats and stuff.
Yeah, right.
Right. And
The created things.
and it's not. It's about the sun and the moon, the stars, the wind, the water, the fire, and the earth. And so, in fact, about all of the things that are also dangerous to us, right? The wind and the water
Right. The wind and the water and the
and the
fire.
fire, and
Right.
the earth has
Hmm.
earthquakes, right? So
Yep.
and that death comes at the end. I mean, that the editors are saying that he added that on his deathbed. Um, but it's part of the same praise because somehow death is also part of the praise of creation.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. All those things that he praised also bring death.
Yeah.
Hmm. Because life is precious and it's temporarily temporary. Right.
So this, I was thinking about this when we were talking in our writing just now about the sort of the problem of time and what it means to be in time. How
Hmm.
we are, I mean, this hard, Tolkien thought about this a lot too, right? Between the elves and the men, that the elves are immortal within creation. So, I
Hmm.
mean, they can die, but they get reincarnated, or he theorizes it. He over theorizes it at the end. It's like, exactly what kind of force is this? Oh, midichlorians, right? As he goes to poor Tolkien. He started trying to, it's like he made these elves because he just wanted to talk about these creatures that, lived, had long lives, right?
Yeah.
Lived out spans of life longer than human beings. And then he, makes men come into contact with him, and then he starts realizing, it's like you've therefore created this problem of mortality and immortality. And the elves are, apparently immortal, although when the world ends, they will end, but they can live once they're born. They can basically live as long as the earth exists, as opposed to men who die. And Tolkien tries to make this in his meditations on this, and Aragorn lives this out most clearly, that death is actually Iluvatar's gift to humanity, the human beings,
Hmm.
that we die. Which Arwen on Aragorn's deathbed doesn't really like. She's like, wait a minute, this is harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
uh, and I have been learning more about Tolkien, and thinking about this book that I'm going to write about Tolkien's prayer life. He was, well, one, very devoted to the Immaculate Conception, and two, I you know uh, greatly devoted to Saint Philip Neri, whose name he actually took as his confirmation name. So he's actually
Hmm.
John Ronald Philip Reuel Tolkien.
Hmm.
The P is actually there in the signature.
Oh.
And Neri seems to have had some of the same kind of joy that Francis does, but the joy is in the midst of recognizing death, which is
He
hard.
saw a lot of it.
And
He saw a lot of it, didn't
Tolkien
he?
saw a lot of it. We're back in the world wars again, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there's a horrible puzzle in terms of, the great heroics and charity and love that people are showing for each other in the disaster only comes about in the context of this terrible disaster, right? It's this
Hmm.
the almost the everything working all the time is more horrible than the potentialities of danger. I thought about this a lot after 9/11, and how, people seemed energized by being alive because
Hmm.
something disastrous had just taken place.
Hmm. That can happen, I suppose, if you're very close to it. Yeah.
Well,
I think that happens to people who have near death experiences.
I do wonder about this in war too, because this is a problem. That, war gives men great chances for heroism and self-sacrifice and camaraderie.
Well, so can a barn raising. Let's stick with that.
Yeah, so it's like there are going to be a lot of barn raisings hopefully in North Carolina soon.
I hope so.
Right. But I no, I this is the challenging meditation for uh I don't understand why the government isn't responding more vigorously, because the people involved in that response, I think, are usually, like they have the jobs that they do because they want to be helpful.
You talking about the government jobs?
Certainly the first responders. Well, like the
The
National
first,
Guard and the it's a- I do we where do we go with this? It's like are the people that are behaving badly bad or misguided?
yes, they're bad.
The
They're
bad.
bad people. And if they're hearing this, they need to stop being bad people and start helping and get out of the way when other people are helping. There, okay. Glad I can clear that up for everybody.
Well, no, but this is the so phew. um
You have to be clear about this. There's right and wrong. These people are doing the wrong thing. They need to stop doing the wrong thing.
Okay, so we've belabored climate change, right, which was the easiest one to do, but the other layers of the expectation that the government should be doing the work, which somewhat comes from it having done decent work in the past, as you say, like in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, I mean, public works projects, yeah, for sure, like dams and roads and trails.
Right.
Some of those trails on the West Coast are still in pretty decent shape. I had a great uncle that was one of those people that got in that as a teenager, got on one of those work teams,
Mm-hmm.
and was able to go all the way to the West Coast to help build roads in Washington State. Yeah, so
right. There's all sorts of parks, and there's out at Starved Rock out here. There's one of those 1930s like lodges, right? You can feel it too. It's like they were all built in this
the
particular
Blue Ridge
kind of
Highway, I think, might have
style.
been one of them. Yeah, a lot of the bridges. Yeah, might have been. I'm not sure about that one, but there are a lot of trails just like it on the West Coast that I have been on that were created by the WPA.
Right. So people have, and there are people still alive that remember that.
Yep.
And
yeah, at least in the 90s there were.
Think of this as this is us working together, right? The government is us working together to resurrect Obama's claim.
Yeah.
And okay, so we decided it's like it's not the wretched poor people wanting to live in the beautiful places, and it's not the wretched rich people wanting to live in the beautiful places, and it's probably not being alive on the planet that's the bad thing. I mean, it's like it feels like in a disaster moment there is something bad, and we're trying to figure out what the bad is.
There's something, well, death is natural, but it isn't normal.
Well, we have this horrible prayer here. Praise be you, my Lord, through our sister bodily death.
Yeah.
From whom no one living can escape.
So I don't quite understand what he was going for with that, but I've no doubt it's something good. I just don't understand it.
Well, this is, I mean, we'll get back to his imitation of Christ in the Passion, right? He so imitates Christ that he receives the stigmata. He so imitates Christ that he ends up in
one of the few men to receive that. It's usually women who receive that, women saints and mystics.
And his in the life, it's described as sort of like he had nails, bumps in them somehow. And he had all five, and so it's like he's embracing. I mean, this is, on the one hand, he's praising other creatures and building things and showing us the great network of cities and responses to urbanization and such. And on the other hand, he is imitating Christ so perfectly that he basically gets the stigmata and dies.
Yeah.
And you say that is, but it's
maybe he was trying to imitate Christ even into death, and that's why he was praising death, because it allowed him to be completely like Christ.
But then I think people have a. I'm trying to figure out what the question is here. It's horrible reading about how many people drowned this past week. It's really, really horrible.
And it is horrible because like I said, death is a natural thing when it comes at a natural time and isn't forced upon people. But logically, we know it could happen to any one of us at any time. Anytime you get into a car, some kind of disaster can happen. A tree can fall on you, you can get hit by lightning, you can drown in a flash flood. Even when it's not a catastrophic type flood like this, when it happens to so many people all at once, it's hard to look at. It's hard to think about. You don't want to think about it because despite the fact that death itself is natural, it's not normal. It's not something you see every day, let alone en masse like that. And that's where the horror comes in.
I saw one. I didn't actually watch the clip because I can't. I find it difficult to put myself in situations where I'm going to cry under those circumstances. But there was one woman describing her son that she saw drowning, floating away from her,
Yeah.
calling for Jesus.
Yeah, I read about that too.
The
Yeah.
little girl with the puppy is an AI generated image, which is
Is it?
yeah. I saw it and immediately like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then be instantly on Facebook, it's AI, come on. So
Yeah, it would have to be because otherwise it would be a Pulitzer Prize winning photo.
yeah, no, there's
For
it's
sure.
not
It
a
would
real
be like one
picture.
of those. Yeah.
And so this like the child, embracing Jesus in his last moments, he was 7 or 8. It's like, this is horrible. Is that not happy? I mean,
Yeah, it is.
it's the I mean, Francis was only in his 40s. He didn't, and people didn't necessarily die in their 40s. He died of his asceticism and his piety.
Yeah, he did. No children are supposed to die, but they do.
Yes.
And it and please people pray for the people responding to this. They're going to be doing a lot of body recovery. It's not going to be a lot of rescue. It's going to be a lot of body recovery. And this is something the Coast Guard deals with all the time. And those men and women need prayers too, because that's a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially where a lot of children are involved. That's harder. It's hard when you pulling adult bodies out of the water, child bodies out of the water. It's harder. It's not something anybody should ever have to do, and yet they do it because it's their job and because they want to help.
Mm. But this does spring us back to the beginning of the question of it's like, so people want to blame somebody for what's happened, which I think is again it's like I think though why the climate change response is a default. It's we got to blame somebody.
Yeah,
because people have now died, and there's all, but the opposite side of the climate change is also, but if we would, I think it's actually a claim that we can technologize the situation, right? If ironically, it's if we didn't have all this technology, we wouldn't be having these natural disasters. But if we had more of the correct technology, then we wouldn't be having these natural disasters, right? If we could just get our tech right, nobody would die.
do people actually believe that? I wonder.
Well, I'm just wondering about it as the sort of visceral root of why people take the responses that they do to the horror of the death. It's like somebody was supposed to be taking care of us and they weren't. We were versus we were supposed to be doing something that we weren't. Versus, I mean, Francis is trying to put us in this situation of, I mean, it's not really stoic, right? Because I don't think it doesn't make sense to say Francis is stoic.
No, but he was radically accepting.
But he was radically accepting in ways that, like, most saying, oh, celebrating death. It's like, no, he wasn't celebrating death in those terms. He's not a nihilist. He's
right. That's a difference. Yeah. No, he was. I mean, death is an inevitability, and I don't think it's well. Clearly, it wasn't something he shied away from, since he did lead such an aesthetic life that it killed him pretty young.
Mm-hmm. He could have.
I don't think anybody would
completely like. He was the son of a very rich man, right? He could have. He was supposed to be. I mean, he had a pretty wild.
He was the only son
upper
of a very wealthy
class,
man.
frolicking, teenagehood.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was going to get it all. Yeah. He gave up a lot. He gave up a lot, and I don't think anybody living today would get permission from their bishop to live that kind of very, very aesthetically hard life as a religious, because it would kill you, and someone might think it's suicidal to do that. But Francis didn't hate life. He sang the praises of creation all the time, and it was the way he did it. It was an appreciation of the Creator,
Which is challenging. I mean, it's like there's a challenging, he's at the level of responsibility for building the church, but also, and I mean, and other things, right? It's like, we're not doing a history of Francis now. We're doing a meditation on being Francis. But he also went and tried to preach to the Sultan. It didn't work.
That's a funny story too. I like that one
and he's
too.
like, he's going to preach to the Sultan and have his head chopped off. So he's practical in his engagement with people. He's obviously, if he's in Brindisi, that's down at the boot of Italy, right? He's wandering around preaching. He founds an entire organization that still exists, right?
Yes.
Which is pretty incredible.
And there have been like additional Franciscan communities created like all over the place, because people trying to get back to, I guess, more aestheticism. I'm not sure.
Well, they're modeling themselves on him and his sort of charism of like what
he's inspired people for 800 years. Right. It's pretty amazing.
Right.
And he continues to.
He is a great saint. He's such a great saint.
Despite Zeffirelli's best efforts to make us reject him as just a tree-hugging hippie, he still inspires.
That movie is a little better than that, but he's a bit wispy and weepy when it's not clear that Francis was quite that, right? I think we'll do the Mel Gibson with the Australian guy cast as Francis, and that will be more. Guys, we figured out your next project.
Yeah, when you're done with that whole sequel to The Passion of the Christ, since you're already in Italy.
Ooh, is he?
Go down to Assisi.
Very good, very good. We will get there. What I am encouraged by is it does seem like there's Francis has way more layers than people tend to think. It didn't just preach to the animals, right? And two, that this problem of living as a Christian in the world was vivid to him, which is what we're trying to understand. And I mean, obviously, the answer from a Franciscan perspective is you have to go help the people who are suffering. No doubt about that. But the blame, right? That's where I'm still saying it's like we started out angry, and I started out sad. You started out wanting to. It's like the anger and the I'm just pressing it because it helps to make the point.
Yeah, I'm a type. I know.
What's funny?
I'm a reliable type.
No, but it's good. It's good. It's good. I realized I wasn't feeling angry in quite the same way, although I am like weary and disgusted. It's like, why are people so stupid? It's my usual situation. It's like, how can you not see that? Well, one, I was wondering, it's indeed that none of the dams broke, right? But how much of the flooding was created by building onto situations which it's going to flood, right? It's a problem. It's like if you build an arroyo in the West, expect the flash flood to take you out.
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, I was wondering that too when it was first happening. I said, how much of this is because they were already holding a lot of water,
right?
So they had a lot more to add to it. 40 trillion gallons. That's mind-boggling.
Well, it's hard.
It's just mind-boggling.
It's hard to know how to like stress test stuff. It's like if it doesn't happen that often, Vesuvius, for example, right? Pompeii got buried, but I'm not sure it's done anything since then, right?
Well, the government of Italy has been paying people to move off of that mountain, trying to.
But people
for
like
over
living,
20
yeah, they
years.
said, but it's beautiful.
That's right. They said, well, but we've lived here for 200 years.
Still here,
You know?
okay, right? And one day
Yeah.
Vesuvius will go off and we'll get a new archaeological dig with bread,
I
right?
don't, yes, never mind all those tourists coming by to see your, your buried ancestors and all their stuff perfectly preserved by the ash. Keep living there.
Hey, but it's so far
Crazy.
so good. That was 79 AD. Come on, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, you really have to admire their, their absolute devil may care attitude towards their own safety.
Yeah, so it's hard. It's hard. People are making choices, and then terrible things happen, and then the situation is such. It's like these. Well, anyway, we've got some chat, right? Robert, hi, Robert, saying, okay, he's hanging out in another live stream. Apparently, I love you, gals. I've been watching for 3 years. Bought the book, been there, and retired the T-shirt. Sam Shamoon. Okay. They do get better benefits than sole proprietor janitors. Okay, the blame is on Christopher Gardner. Who's that? Future betting is always going on. I don't know who Christopher Gardner is.
I don't know either. I have to look up the name. I have a suspicion, but I'll keep it to myself till I find out.
So one of the things that I thought about talking about, which we can come back to at some point, is in fact the way in which Francis prayed. And he wrote, in addition to the Canticle of the Creatures, which everybody tends to know about, he also wrote a long, day-long series of psalms, which is called the Office of the Passion. That's not, not sure really what he called it, right? But he did this daily hours in which he used the text of the psalms to imagine Christ's speaking from the cross, right? And I did a paper that I published about 10 years ago, thinking about, well, why did Francis know which psalms to use? Because it's actually a little more complicated than the ones that talk about suffering. I mean, it's one suggestion was he knew the psalms to use from Good Friday in the liturgy, but I show in this article how that doesn't quite match with the choices that he makes of which one. What I suggest he probably did was take from his Psalter, and medieval Psalters had like rubrics and things on them, the psalms that were labeled as the voice of Christ, right? So again, in Francis's beautiful literalism, if it says in the book the voice of Christ and you have the psalm, that's what Christ said. So he has
very literal.
It's sort of beautifully literal, but in the degree to which he's so amazingly literal, he shows you the depth of what the texts actually say. And this is for most people, is including for the Donovan movie kind of thing. It's like imitating Christ is this imitating the Gospels, or just imitating the actions that Christ took. But it's also, if you realize how sophisticated Francis actually was in his literalness, truly understanding God's relationship with us through Christ, and very much understanding, therefore, all of his meditations on the devotion and his receiving the schemata and such, as God's taking on our suffering. So I think to close tonight, in honor of the people that are wrestling with the floods and the death and caring for each other, in North Carolina, a prayer. Oh, all you who pass along the way, look and see if there's any sorrow like my sorrow. For many dogs surrounded me, a pack of evildoers closed in on me. They looked and stared at me. They divided my garments among them, and they cast lots for my tunic. They pierced my hands and my feet. They counted all my bones. They opened their mouth against me like a raging and roaring lion. I have been poured out like water, and all my bones have been scattered. My heart has become like melting wax in the midst of my bosom. My strength has been dried up like baked clay, and my tongue clings to my jaws. They gave me gall as my food, and in my thirst vinegar to drink. They led me into the dust of death and added sorrow to my wounds. I have slept and risen, and my most holy Father has received me with glory. Holy Father, you held my right hand, led me with your counsel, and have taken me up with glory. For what is there in heaven for me, and what do I want on earth besides you? See that I am God, says the Lord. I shall be exalted among the nations, and exalted on the earth. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who has redeemed the souls of his servant with his very own most holy blood, and who will not abandon all who hope in him. And we know that he is coming, that he will come to judge justice. We thank you for joining us in our Franciscan meditation tonight, and we send prayers to everyone in the floods, in the wars, in trust that God is with us.
Amen.
Amen. See you next week. Oh, see you next week at a different time because we have a guest to talk more about mythology. We'll tell you more in the notices. God be with us. Good night.